Hey everyone. So this video is really probably aimed towards mostly people who don't have HydrosPlus on the 1 series. So here's my 1025R 2018 model, and that's a 1023E 2014 model. Now these tractors, lucky for me, and when I bought them I actually didn't know this, but they're kind of on the other side of some of the serial number breaks. The main serial number break, I would say, for the 1 series is really in 2016, but there's also kind of a minor break, at least when it comes to hydraulics and a few things, in 2014. So that's a 2014, and it takes advantage, or it has some of the kind of the older pieces on it, and this is a 2018, which is past even the serial number break for 2016. So telltale signs, if you want to know, are the ROPs that are leaned forward, so that one's straight. This one's forward. There are different buttons, like this knob here looks different than the one on this one. So they have the fancier looking knob. But functionally, the tractors are basically the same. And but in the 2016 break, there was actually a change from the 260 backhoe to the 260B backhoe that goes on the 2017 and later. But that said, these are perfect examples where I can show you if you have a later model, 2017 and after, or if you have the previous, I can show you on this one. And also, I'll talk a little bit about one of the things when you're buying HydrosPlus that you have to consider, which is the conversion kit. I don't have the old pump readily accessible, but I'll explain what it is you're going to have to change, and it'll make sense, I believe. Now, if you already have HydrosPlus or you don't have a 1 series, there's going to be less for you in this video. I hope you stick around. You might learn something, but ultimately this is trying to help kind of as a primer to the install video, right? The install video I've had for quite some time. It's worked really well. Everybody's, while it is long and it's generally real time, I've gotten a lot of good feedback and people saying, look, I wanted to see exactly what was happening. So that it definitely does that. The downside of that install video is one, it does an install. It's actually on this tractor. And then at the time, we didn't have the additional pump, so that's a separate video. And then also at the time, I'll show you this piece here. Now this tractor doesn't have a backhoe, but I happen to have retrofitted a 260 backhoe on a tractor that was a 2017 model like this. And so I actually knew what was involved. And so when I was developing the solution for this tractor to have a 260 backhoe, I knew what piece I needed, and that's this piece here. Now yours is going to actually have a piece that loops underneath, and as you can see, I didn't even buy all the pieces that connect to the loader boom, because this is really just to show you how if you have a 260 backhoe, how the flow divider kind of tucks behind here, and we actually connect it here. Now, there would be a bolt that comes through with a nut on it. I had taken mine off, and so mine's not in there at the moment. But I'm not intending on telling you exactly how to install it. I'm really just trying to show those who don't have it, if you have a 260 backhoe, and you watch the install video, it doesn't have this unless you watch the supplementary video for the 260 backhoe. So those can be a little bit confusing, and honestly, over 2 or 3 years, that's really the only questions I've had, is if somebody did have a 260 backhoe and then they watched the install. The install was on a tractor with no backhoe. So because of that, it has some spacers that we use. But I don't have them on this, but you'll see them in the install video, and that'll make sense. This is not a substitute, obviously, for the install video, but those are the kind of questions I would get, and so I wanted to make this video so that you would have some of that information. And there's some new things as well. Not only new items that are going to come in the box that you don't see on any of the install videos, but also I've got even one more tip that could make your overall install experience even better. So I'm not going to bother with taking the seat off. That's what you would need to do if you were installing this, and that again is in the install video. But I think I can show you. So the flow divider, actually let's go here. The flow divider is here, and this is the factory one, and it's called the PTO manifold in the documentation. But one of the things you have to do is at the top here, I'm pointing at the top, there's a nut. Again, you'll see this in the install video. And then I even send a shortcut video that talks about, let's see here, that nut is right, let's see, can we get it? It's right in there. I don't know if you can see it. Can I even see it? Yeah, see, it's right there. And it's a hex. Now, I've replaced it because that's what comes in the kit to replace it. But in order to get it out, my hands are already dirty, there is a bar that's in the way. Now, originally, whenever if you watch the original install video, I actually have you take that PTO manifold off, take it over to the bench, and take it apart because it's really hard to take it apart. Don't do that anymore. Now, I've given everybody I send install instructions to, I also send the shortcut that says don't do that. But if you happen to miss that, then you might go ahead and take it off. It doesn't hurt anything to take it off, but you're just gonna it's gonna take more time, and you're gonna have a little bit of a higher chance of a couple of O-rings that are behind there. They are sometimes they can be hard to actually get aligned when you're putting it back on. It's not that hard, but they can fall out, and you might not notice they fell out. And if they fell out and you start it, you're gonna have a leak, and then you're gonna notice that they fell out. You'll pull it back off and fix it. But that said, in order to avoid all of that, there is a shortcut that I talk about, and basically this is the bar that's in the way. And so the piece is down there, and you can just loosen a few bolts here and a few bolts up there, and you can scoot it over, and then you can get a 1-inch socket on there from above, and you can take it off. It's just, you can't do it because it's so short, and you just have to move the bar over to the side. So the extra shortcut, even if you want to go this far, is you can take a socket, not your favorite socket, but a socket, and you need to watch out for how deep the socket actually is, because if you cut it too deep, then it's not actually going to grab anything. But you need to cut it down to about 1 inch tall. And if you do that, you don't even have to take loose these bolts that are over here on the side and move things across. You can actually kind of scooch it underneath, and there's just like, if you scooch it underneath, it's something like this. And then there's just enough room for you to get the end of the ratchet into it with an extension, of course, and you can turn it and you can break it loose. Once you break it loose, you can basically take it out with your hands. It's just really hard to break loose. Also, there's this heavy paint that, if you're familiar with how they build these tractors, I mean, I think they put them all together and then they just slather them with paint, so it's really thick. You do want to make sure that when you put this on, you hammer it down, and I show that in the install video, but you want to make sure you make positive contact and you just break it loose, and then you can pretty much just take it out with this, even take it out with your fingers. So this is a shortcut that will save you a lot of time, because you no longer have to take the PTO manifold off. That's probably going to save you 15 minutes on the install. And the overall install that I did, of course, I knew what I was doing, so while I wasn't going super fast, I didn't really waste any steps. So, it took me an hour. When I installed these for local customers, depending on how much I talk, if it's one that I grab the tractor and I bring it over here and I make the change, to me, I can do it in about 35 minutes, but that's not going to be everybody's experience. I'll keep repeating that every 30-minute job is one broken bolt away from being a 3-day job. So your mileage may vary, but for the most part, an hour to 90 minutes, most people are going to accomplish this. So that's one of the things that I wanted to call out. Don't take the PTO manifold off. If you have an extra 26 millimeter or 1-inch socket and you're willing to cut it off, I didn't even cut this one straight and it works just fine. You can go ahead and do that. save yourself even more time. If you don't want to do that, you can just move a few bolts and actually get onto that and then take it off. You'll be good to go. So that's one shortcut. The other one, let's see. Oh, well, I'm not telling, these are not all shortcuts, but the other thing I want to call out is, and you can see how I have these done. This is even left over from like years ago, literally. And I never put my PTO Shield on because honestly, that thing is in the way. Even if you don't have HydrosPlus, I realize it's a safety thing. For me, I've spent too much time on a Farm All H or an 8N tractor to be worried about this one anymore than I would have been worried about on those. So I don't keep mine on. I can't say that I recommend that, but if you do want to keep it on, we now have PTO Shield brackets that are longer, as you can tell. So these are longer, and what they allow you to do is to replace. Now, you wouldn't have these spacers like I have here, but because I've spaced these out, but they would go right in place of the existing ones, which are these, and they hold the PTO Shield out a little bit further. So that's something that is not in the install video, but these come with every kit. And so you don't have to cut your PTO Shield bracket or PTO Shield anymore if you have the 1 series. If you have a 2025R, then the PTO Shield actually connects to the transaxle is completely different on the 2025R. So it actually connects to pieces that come off the transaxle. And so I don't send those with a 2025R. If you have a 2025R and I accidentally sent you some of those, they're not going to be used, unfortunately. And there's really no way to get around modifying your PTO Shield if you have a 2025R. The difference also, though, for the 2025R is the PTO Shield, and I don't have one here, has a cutout, and then it has a piece that's bent down. I've been told, I don't have a 2025R, but I've been told if you take that and you bend it even a little bit further, then the actual PTO Shield works just fine without having to actually make any cuts to it. So that's going to be your option for the 2025R, is to bend it down a little bit more. Maybe you have to make a cut. I'm just not sure. That's just the feedback that I've gotten. If you have a 1 series, now if you have ordered this, when I came out with these, I made them available on the website. I think I told everybody, but if you don't have any of these and you want some of these, just send me an email and I'll send you some. And you don't have to pay for them. I'll just send them. And that's what I made when I came out with those. They were free to anybody who already had the kit. It may be the case that you didn't know about them, or I didn't get your email right, or whatever it might have been. And if you don't have them, let me know and I'll send you some. All right, the next thing I want to talk about, and you can kind of see it here, but not as much. Here, you can see it really good. Now, and the other place to see it would be here, except depending on when you bought HydrosPlus, these bolts, so these are galvanized, so they don't have any rust, so we don't have to worry about that. But if you, early on and at different times, and I may change it in the future, but I'm probably going to stick with those flange head, we had socket head bolts over on the flow divider. Well, as you notice here, these are rusted. These are black oxide, and they do have an oil coating on them. And for the most part, depending on where you keep your tractor, they won't really rust if you keep enough oil on them, or if you spill enough as you're filling up your tank. But if you were to power wash it or something like this, it'll take all the oil off of it, and this is what you're going to end up with. I have looked 10 different ways on how I could send these to you. Can I powder coat the ends? Can I spray paint the ends already? And I could, but the reality is whenever you tighten them up, you're going to scar the inside, and you're still going to have this problem. So if you haven't already, you might consider taking these off, and not taking them off. Well, if they're this rusty, take them off or clean them up however you want, and just hit this with some black spray paint. I know most people have this around, but if you do that, then you don't have to worry about keeping oil on them so that they don't rust. Now, if you keep them inside all the time, you probably have never seen them rust, so you didn't necessarily know. But again, this tractor stays outside a lot, and obviously these are rusted. This tractor also stays outside a lot, but It's not quite as rusty. It probably does end up inside a little more than the other one. It just depends on how much oil, like I said, goes in this area. And if you hit this with some black spray paint, then obviously that'll keep them from rusting. Otherwise, hit them with some WD-40 or something like that periodically, and they'll also stay at that black oxide color. Now I want to focus on the flow divider here, and whenever you order, I ask you what model is your tractor and does it have a backhoe? That's in the tractor information. Now, based on the web platform I have, I ask that for regardless if you're ordering the scale or if you're ordering this kit. But the reason I'm asking you that, and this is for anybody who might order something, and even if you don't have a 1 series, the reason I ask for that is, well, there's a couple of reasons. One, whether or not you have the backhoe, or if it's a 260 backhoe or no backhoe at all, there's a little bit of difference in the hardware. The other reason is if something does come up and it only affects one type of tractor, and let's say it's not even the 1 series, it's something that I learned about the 2038, if you have the cylinders, having that information is going to let me reach out to you a little bit quicker. Now, if you don't want to give it to me, no problem at all. You do have to put something in that box because it's required. But I'm not selling it. I did work for a company for 20 years that did sell data, so I do have some experience in how to handle customer data, and I promise you I'll never sell it to anybody. But that information, if you want, if you'll leave it for me, it could be useful. If you don't, no problem. If I do learn something about the 2038, I can still go and kind of back my way in to, oh, look, they bought cylinders that go with the 220R loader, so maybe they have a 2038, and I can ask you that question then. So that said, this is the flow divider, and this is on a tractor that does have a 260 backhoe. And if you notice here, this is the subframe for the 260B backhoe. The 260 backhoe I showed you just a bit ago, it goes all the way to the front. It's got a few little other things, and the actual connection is different. So if anybody's watching this and you're wondering if you can use a subframe for a 260B on a 260 backhoe, the answer is no, without any fabrication, because the way they hook in is completely different. This one cradles down here, and then the cradle part, like this part on the 260, is actually on the backhoe, and it hooks on. I don't know why they changed it or which one's better, but that's the difference. But with this subframe, as you can see, this is the actual frame and this is the subframe. And whenever you put a backhoe on, you change some of these bolts out to bigger, heavier bolts. But because this piece of plate here is a 3/8 difference, if you have the 260B backhoe, and you order this, you'll get the same tubes as if you didn't have a backhoe, but you will put the flow divider directly onto the subframe here. And as you can see, and this isn't always true, but as you're aligning it, and you'll see this in install, about right here is where, almost flush with the top of the subframe is where you end up putting the flow divider most often. Now, one other call out I'll make, and on the install video it doesn't have one of these, this is the mechanical deck lift, and you can see we clear this with plenty of room. You want to make sure this is all the way up because that's the highest it ever goes, but you don't really need to clear it by more than a 64th of an inch or whatever, because it doesn't go any higher. But you can see with this, it's a little harder to get to whenever you're doing the install, because on the install video I didn't have this. You don't have to remove it. You can if you'd like, but you don't have to remove it. But we've got the flow divider, and it's on the subframe here. If you don't have the backhoe, you don't have the subframe. So what does that mean? Well, it means that this subframe is actually a little bit taller than this. And so the clearance that you see is going to be a little bit different if you go directly on the frame. The other thing is, because you don't have that 3/8 of an inch there, I send some spacers that you can use, and it basically simulates that gap here. And the reason I do that is so that I don't have to have different tubes here, mainly here, but it would also be here, with the no backhoe or the subframe backhoe here, because because of that gap. It doesn't seem like it's a lot, but that will change the alignment in such a way that it would be really hard to install it if I tried to use the same tubes that I have here. So I just make up the gap with some spacers. It doesn't, it mounts exactly the same way. And that's why if you see, sometimes if I prepackage things, it'll say optional backhoe, and it says on the packing list, you only use these spacers if you don't have a backhoe, which it might seem like you would use them if you had, but it's if you do not have a backhoe. One last thing I'll call out is I don't have my cap on here. With the flow dividers, now they come from the factory at 2 gallons a minute. You are free and welcome to adjust yours however you see fit. For the most part, you don't really need to adjust them. They could be off from the factory, so if you do feel like things are a little tighter, you can feel free to kind of move that out. Just do it very slowly, only maybe a eighth to a 16th of a turn at a time till you get where you want to be. If you haven't seen the video on steering that I showed, if I remember, I'll put a card, down in the corner. And if not, you can see it on the HydrosPlus YouTube site, where it talks about how the 2 gallons per minute affects the steering on the 1 series. All right, I kind of already mentioned this, but just kind of cap it off. We've got, if you have the 260 backhoe, you've got this subframe in the way. So you're going to take this off. And again, there are a couple of other bolts, but they're fairly minor. You can take this off. These can be torqued on pretty good. So if you have a impact, that's probably going to be helpful. But this is, I think, a 28 millimeter. Yes, 28 millimeter, I think. Or 38, I don't remember. You have to measure it. But the tubes that go on this version are different. You can kind of see. Now, you could still have this linkage if you, this tractor has the hydraulic lift, not the independent hydraulic lift, but it has the hydraulic lift. So that's why it doesn't have the piece here. But if you had the piece, it would go like right through here. So this goes up and around. And so on the flow divider, you're going to have the pieces are actually going to point, this one's going to point directly up. If you get one that's pointed this way, you'll need to just adjust it so it's going straight up so it connects into this. And then this tube is different as well. Now, this looks probably a little bit extra maybe, but it's because you don't see the piece that is typically in here if you have the mechanical lift. Also on this, in your kit, you saw, well, I'll go back in just a minute, but we typically have 2 bolts that connect the flow divider to the actual frame or to the subframe on the 260B. In this case, you're going to get a single bolt, and it's going to come through here. You're going to have to drill a 3/8 hole. Now, I don't provide the 3/8 or whatever half inch, whatever you decide you want to do here. I don't provide that drill bit, but on the other version, I do provide the drill and the tap because that's specific to the bolts that I send. This one is a bolt and a nut. So the bolt comes in from the back side and you put the nut here. And again, I should have went and found the nut for this one, but I take it off and on so often that sometimes it doesn't make its way all the way back on. All right, now we're back to the either no backhoe or the subframe on the 260B. And the thing I want to mention is if you watch the install video we use a drill and a tap. So we drill a hole for this and this one, or you may use this one, or maybe you just use the middle. It really doesn't matter. We're just trying to get some stability to this. It probably would last years, not even bolted up, but we want it to be nice and clean. So we put the 2 bolts here. Now, in the video, the install video, I used a traditional drill and tap set. And so this is an M8 by 1.25 bolt that I send with you. And traditionally, you would use a 6.75 millimeter drill bit in order to make the hole to tap. You can do that, but it's not really necessary. Again, we're just trying to hold this together and so that it doesn't rattle and it doesn't move. So what I've done is I've changed to Basically, it's a 7.15 inch drill bit because it's a 9/32, I think. Yeah, 9/32. So it's 7.15. So it's 0.35, no, what? Yeah, 0.3 millimeters. Is that right? 15? No, 0.4. Good grief. Can I do math? 25, 35, 40. 0.4. It's 0.4 millimeters bigger. And obviously, a millimeter is not that big. But if, in the case of what we're doing, this is plenty, it still leaves plenty of meat on the hole so that you can actually tap it in a much easier fashion. So, I slightly larger drill bit in point, 7.15. The threads are 8 millimeter, so we've got almost a millimeter of threads. We've been using this for a long time. I talked to some machinists. They said, yeah, that's totally fine. You're not trying to hold heads on a Ford 6-liter. You're just trying to hold this thing up against the frame here, and for the most part, again, it kind of would stay anyway. Now I send this bit, it's a stubby bit, because whenever you go to drill this hole, and it'll actually be here, this guy right here doesn't move. And so depending on what drill you have, you may not be able to drill. If you've got a big drill, you're not going to be able to drill. So you're going to drill the second one here. But if you have a shorter drill, and most drills today are pretty thin, you'll be able to drill the hole. And again, the install video tells you how to mark it, but we do a stubby bit so that you can actually get in there and make that drill on the bottom side. On the top side, no problem at all. The other thing that I made a change on is, rather than using a 4 flute tap, which is kind of a traditional off-the-shelf tap, we use a 2-flute spiral gun tap. This tap is designed to, as you tap into a hole, it's designed to push the shavings forward. The 4-flute tap, I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what it's designed to do. I think it's designed for the shavings to bind up and break the tap. They do make taps that are made to pull the shavings out this direction. This one is to pull them through the other direction. Now, of course, if you had a hole that it did not go all the way through, which in this case we do go all the way through, then you wouldn't want to use this tap. But for through holes, this is the best tap. And honestly, when I tap them today, I buzz this guy through. It's a brand new black oxide drill bit. It makes quick work of even this frame material, as long as you don't, make sure you're putting adequate pressure and you don't work harden where your hole is. But once you buzz through with this, then I actually use an impact wrench. And I learned this from a YouTuber called Jamie is Online. He always uses it. Of course, he's a machinist, so if he messes it up, he knows how to fix it. But I've used it plenty of times with no issue with the small, like 3/8 impact or 1/4 inch impact. Obviously, you want to make sure you're going straight in, but doing that, it just buzzes right through. If you don't want to do that, you can use your tap wrench on this square piece, or in my case, I used, I think, a 1/4 inch ratchet, and this is it's 10 times easier than what you saw me do on the install video. So if you're worried about tapping this hole, do not worry about that anymore. I don't have anybody that, of late, since we've changed to this, I don't think anybody has broken a tap, or they've not reported they've broken a tap. It's not that it's impossible, but this makes it a whole lot easier than using the 4-flute tap. The hole's slightly bigger. The tap is more appropriate for what we're doing here. So do not worry about the tap. That said, I have had people who just didn't want to mess with it. They didn't want to drill. And what they ended up doing is actually taking some clamps, and you can actually run all the way through here, and they actually clamped it to this. I've had guys tell me they've clamped it. I've had guys tell me they've used double-sided tape on the back of it and pushed it against it, clamped it here until it held, and then boom. There are ways that you do not have to drill a hole if you don't want to. I recommend it. Nobody's ever going to see this. Nobody looks down here. And even if they saw a tapped hole, say for instance you had some type of warranty claim and you wanted to take this off so they wouldn't think that this might be part of the problem when it absolutely isn't. If you did that, if they saw a tapped hole there, they really wouldn't think anything about it. So that's why I still recommend that you do it that way. But if you don't want to, there are some other options that you have. All right, I mentioned that this tractor is one of the older vintage, so it has the straight ROPS here, and what it has that you cannot see here is actually the original pump has 3 bolts that go into the side and the metal tube that comes up from down here. So notice this boot is a lot longer than it would be on this tractor, and I guess if you only have one, it really doesn't matter. It kind of comes up to here. But this is what this tractor looks like from the factory. It has these 2 clamps here, it has a rubber elbow, and it has this going down into the sump. On this tractor, previously, it had this boot to here, and then it just had a metal tube that goes all the way up to here, and there's 3 bolts in the side of the pump. If you have those 3 bolts, regardless of how old your tractor is, if you have those 3 bolts, then you're going to need the conversion kit. What comes in the conversion kit is a new tube right here, this elbow, and then 2 clamps. I'm using an old clamp there, but the clamps look like this. Now, that's what the conversion kit includes, and that's not something, that's basically what it costs me. I just provide that at cost so that whenever you want to upgrade, you can actually upgrade from the older style pump to the newer style pump. Now, if your pump doesn't look anything like this, and you have a 1026, so some of the early 1026s had a different pump shape. Because of their pump shape, they have 2 bolts down here. The bolts that hold the pump on are hex head, and these are socket cap. So if you have a 1026, I do send the bottom bolts and these bolts. If you don't have a 1026, you have anything later, I just send these bolts and you reuse the bolts that are down here. So when you look in your hardware kit, you're gonna have 2 bolts that go here, and you also have this fitting on the side that you'll install. If you have the earlier 1026R and it's got hex bolts with a different style pump, you're gonna have 2 bolts here, 2 longer bolts, 2 shorter bolts, and you'll also still have this fitting. Now 1026, they're old enough that they all do require the conversion kit. So if you have a 1026, you need the conversion kit. Right up to about 2014 to 2015, that's when they made the change to this boot versus having the bolts inside. So if you got a 2015, just have a look at it here and you're gonna see whether you have the boot or you don't. If you got a 2014 or below, most likely you have the 3 bolts on the side and you're gonna need the conversion kit. All right, my last piece of advice, I think, for this video, and I'm sure I'm gonna kick myself for not making a list and I probably forgot something, but the last thing I would say, and this is specific to the 1 Series or the 2nd Gen 2025R, is if you're wondering which one to buy the Stage 3. And the reason why is that's the most, I make the most money off of it and it costs the most. Not really. Actually, if you buy the Stage 1 or 2 and then you upgrade to the Stage 3, that's how I actually make the most money. But I don't want to make the most money in this case. I want you to be happy. And I can tell you we're hundreds and hundreds of these that have been sold. Almost everybody ends up at Stage 3. Why? The reason why is there's really only one downside to going to Stage 3. And I would argue it's not a downside because if you eventually go to a Stage 3, then it's an upside. But the one upside, and this is as of this video, but I don't have any plans to really change this, but it costs right now $200 more to get Stage 3 versus getting Stage 2. It costs, I want to say $600-ish more if you get Stage 3 versus Stage 1. So get Stage 3. Everybody ends up there. They regret. I have so many people who, if they buy Stage 2, they call and they say, I should have just went to Stage 3. Don't even buy Stage 1. I'm just telling you that. I keep it out there because, first of all, it messes up. It's like situations where if you have only your sizes were like medium, large, and extra large, and they're like, why don't you have a small? Well, because nobody ordered the small. And that's why they don't have a small, but then you're like, well, why didn't you move it back? It's a thing that's sometimes hard when you already have some things set up for like sizes. Same thing kind of goes here. I've got stage 2 and stage 3, and somebody is certainly going to ask, like, where's stage 1, or what was stage 1? Well, to answer the question, stage 1 is the flow divider and the plumbing and everything you need, and it is, you use your stock pump. You don't get a pump from me. So if you're trying to get a pump, a new pump, say your pump goes out and this happens, then you definitely don't want stage 1, even though that's the cheapest option, because then you don't get a pump. Stage 2 is what used to be called the extreme capacity pump. So if you've looked at some of my older stuff, you're going to know that we would have high flow. What do we call it? High flow. I can't even remember what the first one was called. But then we had extreme. And extreme is now, actually, that's what's on this one. It is it's about 8 gallons a minute, roughly 7.5 to 8 is what I tell people that you're going to get on the stage 2, or previously known as the extreme. And one other thing that has changed over time is when I originally started, the second stage was actually the same pump, or second stage, or the second size, was actually the same pump that came in the 2025R. So early on, if you had a 2025R, then you should just get the performance kit. There was performance kit, and then there's high flow, and then there was extreme. So you should, if you just had the 2025R, maybe you should just get it if you just wanted a little bit more. But we have grown, and actually in the future, there may be one more pump that comes that's even larger. But I think if we go larger, there are going to be some other changes that have to be made. Stay tuned on whether or not we get more. But now, stage 2 is bigger than your 2025R. It's about 10 to 20, I'm going to say, I don't remember the math, percent bigger than your 2025R pump. So you could have a 2025R, buy a stage 2, and you would actually increase your hydraulic flow over your stock pump, not just because it's HydrosPlus, but also because you have a bigger pump. So we no longer have the 2025R equivalent pump. The stage 2 is bigger than that, and the stage 3 is much bigger than that. But again, if you're watching this, I implore you, do not buy stage 2, even though that might stick me with a bunch of stage 2 pumps I never actually sell, and I end up losing money technically on them. That's not my priority. My priority is to get you what will make you happy at the lowest cost available at the time, and that's going to be the stage 3. Now, why would I want to do that, and why wouldn't I want to just upgrade you through? It's because that's not how I want to make money off of you guys. I want to make money by setting you the base of what we need in order to make this tractor an amazing machine. It's already amazing, but it's going to be even more amazing. But start with stage 3. And then you can get bigger cylinders, you can get backhoe cylinders, you can get other things that will work so much better with the stage 3 pump, or the fact that you even have HydrosPlus at all. And you don't have to waste your money on giving it to me so that I can exchange your pump for, and send it back and ship them back and forth. Just go with stage 3. But I'm not making choices for you guys. You guys know what you need. You know what your requirements are. And I will leave these out there, stage 1, stage 2, and what you really should get is stage 3, and maybe a future stage 4. Who knows? Okay. Maybe I got a little bit on a soapbox there, but really it's frustrating to me that it ends up costing more for all of us if we do it the other way, just because so many people have told me I should have went to stage 3. But here's the other reason, and then I'll close it out. But the other reason to go to stage 3, I mentioned there's no downside, but a little bit more money, but it's only that one time, and it ends up being cheaper if that's where you end up anyhow. The last thing to talk about is how you think about having more hydraulic flow, right? So this has stage 2 on it. This has stage 3. At wide open throttle, this has, we'll call it 8 gallons a minute to the implements. And at wide open throttle, this one has about 9.5 gallons per minute to the implements, 9.5 to 10. But if you want 8 gallons a minute from this machine, at wide open throttle, you get 8 gallons a minute. From this machine, you only have to go to 2,800 RPMs, and now you've got 8 gallons a minute. So that's the basis of why have this one versus this one, is because you can do things at lower RPMs. But that's really not even the point that I really want to make, which is bringing those RPMs way down. And this kind of gets into the turbo realm, right? So you have plenty of kind of low end oomph, but this stage 3 pump at idle at 1550 to 1600 RPMs produces the same flow right around 3 to 3.5 gallons per minute as you would wide open with the stock tractor. So that means at 2000 RPMs, then you're now producing, 5 gallons a minute. That 5 gallons a minute in a lot of cases, especially if you're trying to stay quiet, you're in your neighborhood, or you're just doing something that's not really that fast, 5 gallons a minute is plenty of speed to do 2 functions at once, to lift whatever you need to lift, to get into the mulch or the pile of rocks or whatever. It's plenty of speed. I would say that right at, with this tractor at idle, you can do 2 functions at once. On a stock tractor, to even start getting 2 functions at once, you have to go wide open throttle. Well, this can do that at idle, which, it's not great, but it starts to actually work. But on this tractor, because it has stage 3, at 2000 RPMs, you've got 5 gallons a minute, and, you have plenty of speed to do whatever you want. This tractor is stage 2, so in order to get to the 3.5 gallons a minute you would have as a stock tractor, you need to be at about 18 or 1900 RPMs, which is still very low, but why not do that, at 18 or 1900 RPMs, why not be getting 4.5 to 5 gallons per minute so that you can actually use your loader much better? Other thing, if you have a backhoe, it's going to make, the backhoe, you're not moving. So if you are doing loader work, you might want more flow not more flow, you might want more RPMs because you need more ground speed. With a backhoe, you don't need more RPMs because you don't need ground speed. Now, the backhoe does have up to 4 functions at the same time, so you probably want more RPMs than just idle or, 5 gallons per minute. You probably want somewhere closer to maybe 7 to 8 gallons per minute, which on this tractor is going to be around, 2,800 to 3,000. 8 gallons a minute here is going to be 3,300 RPM. So same use case, stage 3 gets you there 500 RPMs less fuel, less noise, less wear and tear on your machine. That's the reason to go to stage 3, or whatever the biggest stage we end up with. That is exactly the reason to do it, is because you can bring those RPMs down. Everything gets better, in my opinion. The last thing on that topic is, for your loader, this is a variable stick. So whenever you have a stock tractor, and especially if you're less than wide open throttle, if you go to lift something up, you're going to pull back just because it's not going to go very fast, and you want it to go as fast as it can. After about 5 to 10 minutes with seat time of a tractor like this at 2,300 RPMs, you're going to be using the bucket, and it's going to be, rather than like this and like this and like this, it's going to be all right here in the middle. And you will get very good. I'm surprised, honestly, at how good I feel like I can operate this loader. And I don't end up driving these tractors as much as I used to. But I can get on here and I feel very comfortable, and I'm using, I have my elbow on the armrest and I'm using the loader joystick, but it's not like this, it's like this. And that's, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but certainly after, one pile of gravel or one small load of something that you're moving, you're going to adapt to having those nice, smooth, easy movements. And on top of that, your sweet spot for having two functions at once is like this. I mean, it is so easy to hit when you have plenty of flow to eat wherever you need to put it. If I remember, I'll put a link to the video on the parallel valve and why John Deere seems like it's not as good as a Kubota is, at least for the joystick. It is, once you get plenty of flow, I think it's better. Before you have plenty of flow, I go with a Kubota. There are trade-offs, and you can see in that video. But once you have HydrosPlus, once you have plenty of flow to whichever circuit you want to use, the tractor does what you ask it to, you're never waiting on it anymore, even at low RPMs. So I think that's probably enough for this video. I'm sure I missed something. If you don't already have HydrosPlus, definitely take a look at some of the later videos. I mean, there's definitely, I don't take any videos down, so you can definitely look at some of the older stuff. I say the later videos because some of these things have changed. Again, stage 1, 2, and 3 versus high flow, extreme capacity, those types of things. Those are all a little bit different now. Go with stage 3. Check out the shortcuts and make sure you don't miss them. Get a rattle can for some of these small things that really I can't solve from where I sit. But, for the most part, even if you do have, a little bit of rust, it's not going to be too painful. And if you already have some, you should be able to clean that up and hit it with some spray paint, no problem. That's it for this one. Questions, comments, leave them below. And thanks for watching.